Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. So what I'm going to do a video on today is just whether you should go for a regular saver, or whether you want to go for a um, like a cash ISA option, or if you want to just go for an easy access account, basically. Right. So you might think that if you go for a regular saver. So Virgin Money's recently come out with a 10% interest one, right? So that there's always conditions like with that one. You have to have a current account and it's got a limited term. So I think it's until July next year. But yeah, you never quite get the headline. Well, you do get the headline rate, but only for the money it's in there. So if you imagine, the limit on that one is £250 a month. So you put that in for 12 months. The total you'd have at the end, not including the interest, would be £3,000. So if you did, if you ran it down to 10%, you think, oh, you get £300 interest. But that's not strictly true because the interest will be often based on the average amount. This one's paid quarterly. So what you'd get is, if you imagine if your money is in there month one, the average is probably going to be £125 because some of it will be zero, some of it will be at £250. And then the second month, you might, as long as you don't take any money out, you'll start it at £250, but then you'll end it at most £500, assuming, again, no withdrawals. So the average will be, £375 kind of in between the two, and that'll kind of continue. So, in 3 months, you're not going to get, you wouldn't have £750 in for the entire time. You'd have an average of, potentially, depending on which days you fund it and what have you, your average would be less. So it might be 625, might be a bit less. So that's just something to be aware of. You're not going to necessarily get that full rate. And if you miss a month, obviously that will kind of reduce the amount you'll get, and so on. So yeah, so it is an option, and 10% is a really good rate. So even if you on average get it for less, that is quite a good rate. Remember, because it's just a normal regular saver type account, and you have to have a current account with Virgin Money as well, that would be taxable. So just something to have in mind. But obviously, if that is your main savings, it's unlikely that you'd come into a tax bracket with that. But yeah, just something to be aware of. Before I go on, I would just say, if possible, if you could like, comment, and subscribe, that'd be great. And if you consider also turning on notifications, that would help. I'm just aware that there's lots of content on YouTube, and any help you can give would be great, especially if you're enjoying the videos. And I'll take a look at any comments that go up there, and do my best to help with those. So it's not financial advice, but it's just maybe ideas that great if you've thought of them already, but if you haven't, hopefully they'll help. Anyway, so back to this. So yeah, so there's the option that there's those kind of monthly savers. So that's like a quarterly interest one, Virgin Money, with a very good rate. I've spoke about ones before that previously you could get 6% or so. Now often they've dropped to in the region of 4%. So what I'd say with those is they're going to work the same way. They'll probably pay you on the average. The average amount held in that account. So, if it's, again, say for ease, say if it's a £250 maximum you can put in, you're going to have £3,000 in there. But say if that's averaged over the year, you probably only have on average £1,500 in there. So if you're only going to get 4% on £1,500, that's not a great rate, when the alternative to monthly savers would be, I suppose, if you're just going to keep them in a normal kind of taxable savings type account, relatively easy access, you'd have it in something like CHIP, and it's around 4.5%. So base in the UK anyway, the base rate's around 5%. So technically, you're losing money through inflation with that. Somehow, Trading 2 and 2 is still keeping their rate above this, above the 5%. Base rate, inflation rate, in the UK, because they're still giving you 5.2%, and that's true for, I think the US is 5.1% on just money held in accounts and not invested, not on an ISA, just gets 5.2%. So, it is quite a good rate. It's almost, in a way, it's an inflation beating rate. And in Europe, it's about 4%. In other places, it varies. Some of the high ones are about 8%. Some of the low ones are not much above 1.5%. But yeah, so that's an option if you want easy access, and paying tax on the income. The interest isn't going to be a problem. You could look for those for options. I suppose it is potentially you will have to have another account that you may or may not have, so it's potentially a little bit of hassle there. But normally it's beneficial to holding it in a current account. So in a current account, you're probably going to get 1 or 2%, which again, compared to in the UK, when the base rate's 5%, that's quite a big loss there, really. Yeah. So those are kind of some easy comparisons. And with the Trading 212, it's daily interest. With the chip one, I think it's monthly. But and you could always just keep it in there until the rates start to change, and then you could review it. But when you can get 4.5 to 5.2%, that's quite a lot better than a monthly one that's going to pay on average, which might work out as only 2 or so percent. So anything like 1-2% isn't great. As always, you got to take into account any fees that you might pay for these products. But with Trading 212 chip, there's no actual fees for those accounts. So they're like a good one to look at. And I suppose an alternative to those is you might, with your same bank or with these providers that I've mentioned, often you can get easily 4.5 to 5% on either fixed term cash ISAs or flexible cash ISAs. And I suppose the advantage of the fixed term cash ISAs being around 4.5% easy is you can put all the money in straight away. So you're getting 4.5% on the total amount rather than 4.5% on the average amount. And that's assuming you can put it all in straight away, that you meet any minimums, and you don't withdraw any. A lot of them kind of give you penalties if you withdraw them. So just be aware that that's kind of through your bank. With a fixed term ISA, specifically like a 1-year fixed term bond, or ISA, you just got to be careful of any fees removing money, and how that impacts the interest. But it's untaxable is the main benefit, I suppose, if you've got an allowance in space in your ISA for it in the UK, and if and obviously the overall interest you'd get would be higher. So it's not taxable and it's higher. So compared to, say, a 4.5% monthly saver, it potentially could be double without any tax liability on it. So that's quite good. With the variable interest ones, like with CHIP, 212, etc., they're higher rates. So they're around 5% still as well. But they are tax free. But also because they're variable, they'll drop when the rate drops. Whereas that's the advantage of the fixed rate ones is if Bank of England rate drops to 2% at some point, you're making 2.5% above base rate. Whereas with I suppose we don't know what Trading 212 will do, because I suppose they could keep them high as they're doing with their general kind of money that you hold with them account. But in terms of CHIP, they did recently drop their rate when the Bank of England rate dropped. So that would just be something that you got to keep your eye on if you've got money in a variable interest account. Yes, it might be better now, but that's not going to be the case if the Bank of England rate drops, if it pulls those down. So yeah, hopefully you found that quite helpful. Just because hopefully it'll save you, whether it's £10, £100, what have you. It's good to be making as much as you can on the money, ideally above the the base rate. Obviously, investing is always going to generally, especially in the long term, outperform those. And again, ISAs will be tax free in the UK. But you could just invest in a general investment accounts. Just be aware that obviously then it becomes taxable if you earn above the thresholds, which will vary depending on your total income. Hope you find that helpful. I'll do another video soon, and yeah, I'll see you then.